Chapter 176. Father! V shouted like a scream. No, it was definitely a scream. He looked at my grandfather with eyes wide open as if he couldn't understand what he had just heard. You're going to revoke all my rights. V's body trembled as if it were a shaking tree. You can't do that, father. You can't do that to me. V's, who had been muttering over and over again, suddenly approached my grandfather. No matter how much you say you're a father, you can't throw me away. You are not qualified to be angry. Vis was now angry at my grandfather. Grandfather also raised one eyebrow, as if he was dumbfounded. I'm Lombardi. My right to inherit the Lombardi noble lineage cannot be denied here. Vis was like a child who was throwing a tantrum. A tantrum. No, it would be cute if it was a child. I could see my grandfather's patience running out. He shook his head and cut off his word and said it clearly. You can't deny that I've given you so many opportunities, but the family does not need anyone who uses their blood to gain personal gain. Astana and Lorraine's marriage seemed to be the last line that should not be violated according to my grandfather. Certainly, my grandfather's expression toward Vise was different from before. Father, fear permeated Vise's face. However, my grandfather looked coldly at such a Vise and turned away. It was then, flop. Vise knelt down in front of my grandfather. I'm sorry, I've sinned to death. Father, please forgive me. The servants who were busy carrying luggage and the administrators who were watching the situation were surprised, because it was the first time for everyone to see Vise like that, who was usually arrogant. Please forgive me. Vise was really lie down flat, like a man who wants my grandfather's grace more than anything right now. There seemed to be desperation in his voice. However, my grandfather, who was looking down at Vise, has just frowned a little. He didn't seem to believe a word of sincere apology from Vise. It's late, Vise. My grandfather, who left the words, went in without looking back. Sure enough, soon as my grandfather disappeared, Vise rose from his seat, spouting out curses, and he glares for a long time toward my grandfather's office, spits on the floor, and walks in the direction of the detached house. There's nothing he did that goes well. Like a bad-tempered child, it sounds like a stomping step when he walks. Well then, what is an apology? People like these don't change. He repeats the same mistake and eventually drives himself to the cliff. The key is how the Empress will come out. In fact, it is obvious how the Empress will turn out. As I said just a moment ago, people don't change. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Ah, Perez, a lowly thing gets in the way of my work. Ah, Clang, I'll kill you. Kill him now. Ah, Brang. Luigi and Janus, after the firstborn succession law failed a month ago, he trembled as he remembered Empress Rabini, who was running wild. So far, Robini has caused him a lot of fear, but he swears he has never been as afraid as he was that day. The Empress, who missed her target in front of her eyes, couldn't control herself. Not only did she break everything in her room, but she even hurt people. The tea is too cold. Bring it back. Yes, yes, Empress. That's why a large number of maids were replaced beside the Empress. All the maids with big and small injuries wanted to retire, and Luigi and Janice had to release a small amount of compensation to keep them quiet. Besides, it was a big deal to find new maids, because no one wanted to work beside the Empress. In the end, as they filled the seats with only those who needed money, the level of maid in honor naturally dropped, and the Empress became more sensitive, saying she didn't like them. Any interesting news in the capital, Luigi? She's smiling now. The devilish appearance of that day kept overlapping over the beautiful face of Robini, and Luigi avoided her gaze. There is nothing that really interests you, Empress. Ha ha ha. An awkward smile followed. Hmm. So, Rabina's blue eyes started as if they were digging into Luigi and Janice. Then, as if it had never happened, she smiled brightly. I don't know what the prince is doing these days. He doesn't even know his he doesn't even show his face to this mother very often. So how upset she is. Astana had been away from the Empress Palace for a month. Rumor that Rumor has it that my mother is crazy. I'm the successor to the throne. What if I get hurt while going to a crazy person? I will say hello to my uncle instead. It was an excuse to avoid the hassle of stopping by the Empress Palace to greet her. What he said to his mother was heartless, but Luigi and Janice was not surprised. Because Astana is Rabini's child, no wonder they look alike. Rabini's karma to have such a child was another karma. His Highness is not so busy, Luigi said as if he had no choice but to hide his innermost thoughts. And he blurted out what happened recently to Astana. His Highness' hunting skills are improving day by day. Not long ago, he achieved the splendid result of being second in the fall hunting contest. As soon as he said it out loud, Luigi felt sorry. Sure enough, Empress Rabini squinted and asked, Second place? Then who was the first place? Well, that's... Come on, Luigi. Luigi and Jenna chewed his tongue. Why did I bring this up? But it was impossible to remain silent under the eyes of the fierce Empress. Eventually, he closed his eyes tightly and opened his mouth. The second prince. Tuk tuk. The gruesome sound of grinding teeth rang. With the word second prince, Rubina became a completely different person. Where did the soft smile go? And her eyes changed in anger. Tak, Empress, I brought you hot water, as you said. Unfortunately, the young maid returned with the teapot carefully supported. This, Luigi and Jenna clicked his tongue. Bad luck, he can't believe the maid is coming in now. For the Empress, who was only looking for a place to vent her anger, she was a good prey. The Empress picked up a teapot on a tray and threw it at the maid in Honor's feet. Clang! Ah! The maid screamed in the hot water that covering her feet and ankles. Empress, are you trying to harm me now? Well, I don't know what you mean. I'm just following orders. Don't you think I don't know what it feels like to drink boiling water? Well, I really don't mean that. The maid, trembling with pain and fear, looked at Luigi for help, but the return was only his tongue, clicking sound, and a blind eye. The pale-faced maid lay down flat. Save me, Empress. It was a pathetic voice, but the Empress did not blink an eye. Maiden honor, take this child away. Eventually, only after the Empress's maiden honor brought in a big servant and dragged the young maid out, the Empress' complexion was refreshed a little, Rabini said, tapping her hand at the hem of the dress with a little splash of tea water. I can't, Luigi, fill that maid's place with the people of Angenas. Yes, they're noble, but they're from the same family as commoners, so they don't learn anything. If they're Angenas, I'll be able to keep them by my side. The only woman suited in Angenas as maid of honor was Luigi's daughter. Luigi quickly rolled his head to avoid answering without losing his smiling face. It was to think of something that might change the subject of conversation. Then a letter in his arms popped into Luigi's mind. Cesarel has asked the Empress to deliver this letter. It was a letter she sent to Angena's mansion instead, saying she was not in a situation to enter the palace. Cyril, as Rabini showed her interest, Luigi quickly held out the envelope. Oh my, Rabini, who had been reading what Cyril would have written with care, murmured with regret. Cyril and Vice Lombardi is in trouble. It looks like they were out the eyes of the Lord of Lombardy because of pushing the marriage. But that was all. Rabini threw Cyril's letter aside as if she was cleaning up annoying trash. Excuse me. She didn't even say anything more about Lombardi. She looked quietly lost in thought, but she didn't seem to be worried about Cyril. Sister, Luigi and Janus asked oddly, shouldn't you help Cyril? Rabini blinked a couple of times her big, beautiful eyes, and she replied, why would I help Cyril? Well, that's it. Cyril has been loyal to Empress Rabini. She brought her son Belsak into Astana's supporter and took charge of the bad work needed for the social gathering held by the Empress. It wasn't just that. Vis has been moved in favor of Angenas, as her cousin-in-law, Rabini, told him to. Lombardy's large and small businesses, such as real estate and mining, helped Rabini. But now that Cyril is in trouble, the Empress seems to have forgotten all that. Luigi, Rabini said with a grin, they've already been disqualified and kicked out to a separate house. There's nothing more Cyril can do for me. Her words gave chills on Luigi's arm. Even at this moment, Rabini's only interest was what Cyril can do for herself. By the way, Cyril's husband has been pushed out of the successor line, so I'll have found out what Lord of Lombardy had in mind as soon as possible. Maybe it's Galliahan, right? Empress Rubini murmured with her eyes full of obsession. Cyril's letter was blown up and lying on the floor. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lady, a letter has arrived, Laurel said, handing me a packet of letters. I replied, burying my face further with the book I was reading. Ugh, it's annoying. It's all invitations to the banquet anyway. No, I'd say that, but I think that's right. Put it on my desk, Laurel. If I have a time later, I can reply at once. Wait, what did I just see? I jumped up from the sofa I was half lying on and walked over to Laurel. That's, among the numerous envelopes, there was a single piece that stood out. Laurel, what the hell did you bring? I'm sorry, lady, what did I bring? When I frowned, Laurel apologized first. After sighing, I made small tongues with my thumb and index finger and picked up the tip of an envelope in the package. It was a familiar purple envelope. It's the Empress, dark and vivid purple. It's indeed the Empress Rabini's invitation. I had my last hope that it might be got the wrong place to go, but the back of the envelope was clearly written in colorful handwriting. It's written, Florentia Lombardi. It really bothers me. End of chapter 176. Chapter 177. Hunting was a leisure life that any nobleman enjoyed regardless of age. Thanks to this, the value of the land, which included a good hunting ground, doubled. It was the fox hunting season, which has just entered early fall. Throughout the empire, there were several famous hunting sites for fox hunting. One of them was Baraport family lands in the Midwest. And in the Baraport estate, hunting contests have been going on for 3 days. In front of the Baraport family's mansion, bonfires rose throughout the large and wide fields, and hundreds of tables and chairs were carved from rough wood. It was a kind of banquet decoration that mimicked the night rest of hunters hunting for a living, not aristocrats hunting for leisure and hobby. As a result, instead of delicate glasses, a ragged wooden glass was filled with high prescription alcohol and served a large roasted dish that could be eaten with bare hands and a fork. The sun had just set, and the third night of the after party was heating up. Then a loud noise broke out from the big table in the middle. Win, win, your highness, cheer up a little more. The first Prince Astana and the second son of the Baraport family were arm wrestling. The second son of the Baraport family, who likes to use his body rather than his head, and Astana, who is short and small, were not a good match. But despite the difference, the second son of the Baraport family was using some effort that turned his face red. Eek, wow. No, he was pretending to use some effort. Wow, your highness win. Win, win. Anyway, it was a fact that everyone who cheered so hard knew it. Perez, who was watching the funny play from afar, sneered with the corner of his mouth. You're working hard. Isn't that how they survive? Lignite also said with a click of the tongue. In the first place, it was a hunting competition hosted by the Baraport family, Anjana's vassal family, so it was full of nobles who supported the first prince. But the first prince seemed sincere. Maybe he doesn't know. It was their academy classmates Tilly and Pedro, who had recently joined Lignite and Perez. Who knows that idiot? Lignite said bitterly, but not the other two. Steely, who was seriously looking at Astana, first spoke in a low voice. 1 silver for he doesn't know. Then Pedro shook his head, lifted his finger as if he didn't know anything. Me, he pretended not to know because of his pride for 2 silver. Oh, it makes sense. Then I'll change it to that too. What? Then the bet won't work. The arm wrestling, the arm wrestling was coming to an end while the two quarreled. Baraport's second son's arm, which seemed to hold out a little, eventually began to tilt back little by little. Oh, Prince, a little more. The cheering sounds around him also intensified, and in the end, flop. Baraport's second son's hand collapsed helplessly to the side, touched the back of his hand to the table. Wow, as expected of the prince, among the second son of the Baraport family and his cheering young aristocrats who beat the table with resentment, Astana clenched his fist. He looked completely intoxicated with victory. You're paying the price. Paris approached Astana one step at a time, soothing his disgust with such words. Ha ha ha, this is how powerful I am. Ha ha. Did you see that? Astana, who was laughing loudly, stopped talking when he saw Paris walking, and he frowned a lot. He didn't have enough thoughts to hide his innermost thoughts. What are you? Astana first looked at and down at Perez and asked. Arm wrestling looks fun. Perez replied, looking back at the nobles around him. I'm thinking of joining in. At the same time, the young nobles became quiet. There was an awkward atmosphere when everyone exchanged glances without saying a word and looked around. You. Astana stuttered. You have to beat him first, so you deserve to challenge me. You don't even know that, Astana said, pointing fingers at the Baraport's second son in a hurry. Perez's red eyes slowly turned over there. Flinch. Baraport's second son, who had acted skillfully to please Astana a little while ago, could not even make eye contact with Perez. There were so many rumors that they heard about the second prince, and fear was rose on Baraport's second son, which had lined up for the first prince. For a moment, Perez shook his head lightly without saying anything. No, I already beat you in the hunting contest, so don't I deserve to try arm wrestling immediately? Perez's voice somewhere rang low in the field. Now all the nobles were looking only at Astana. Perez was right. In a hunting competition a few days ago, Perez beat Astana with a very wide difference. Astana shook under his eyes a few times and cried out, Huh, I don't know if it's your skill or your lieutenant. Perez's lieutenants were referring to Lignite, Pedro, and Steely, who was participated in the hunting competition as assistants. Then you took 5 lieutenants to the party, but the only thing that you can catch is the facts. Are you a mess, or are your lieutenants a mess? Hey, lowly thing, be polite to the first prince, you lowly thing. In the end, Astana, who was shaking, only spoke of lowly thing. Perez was annoyed. He can't believe that that's his opponent. His mother, the Empress, had a little bit of a fighting spirit, but not Astana. He was a poor competitor who extinguished even the remaining flame of competition. Step. Perez is one step closer when he said, looking down, You should be grateful that I shared half the blood with you, Astana. Astana was overwhelmed by Perez's energy and couldn't even speak properly. Perez, who smirked at Astana in such a pathetic way, said, Are you angry? I am the Lambro Empire, me, the eldest. Shh. Perez lifted his index finger and put it on his lips. If Astana talks more bullshit, he might really want to kill him. Fortunately, Astana listened to Perez well. Perez, with a gloating smile, spoke in a more relaxed voice. If you were really good at it, if you want to beat me, take part in a hunting competition next month in the Lombardy estate. Astana's blue eyes shook. Perez's red eyes, with his dark hair, turning fiercely. The annual mid-autumn hunting competition in the Lombardy's estate was one of the largest in the empire. So many people participated, and the honor of the winning was great. And most importantly, it unfolded in an unprecedentedly vast hunting ground. In other words, it was easy to manipulate. They say that it is perfect for those who help Astana to participate in hunting competition in their own name and replace their prey with Astana's. Astana's eyes, well aware of it, had a fishy glow of hope. Looking down at the figure carefully, Perez deliberately added, as if he knew nothing. If it's a competition where we have to participate alone, you and I will be able to compete properly. Right, well, yeah, as soon as I get back to the Imperial Palace, I'll submit a contest form, so don't run away. Astana immediately exclaimed. As soon as there was a hole for a cowardly scheme, Perez felt dirty. Sometimes he thought he could understand what Tia said, that idiot. As Perez was shaking his head, Astana continued to shout behind Perez's back. I'll flatten that nose in the hunting contest. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Wahaha. Like a song, other nobles burst into laughter. Steely, who was walking behind Perez on his way back to the mansion, approached the side and whispered quietly, Your Highness. What the hell, Steely? Is that person really your Highness' half-brother? Perez frowned silently. Steely looked back at Astana and said, I don't think anyone would think it's strange if he gets stabbed while riding a horse and disguise it as a fall accident. Right. Everyone would say that an idiot died while doing something stupid. Complete natural history. How is it? Or I think it would be nice to place a poison needle on his foot and die. Wow, man, that's great. Steely and Pedro giggled out a plausible accidental scenario, until Lignite, who had read the discomfort of Perez, slapped them on the back. No conversation came and went until Perez finally returned to his room. And when there were finally only 4 people left in the room, Perez opened his mouth. It is not difficult to get rid of Astana right now, but the problem will remain the same. The problem was the Empress. The real target of revenge was always the Empress. We have to weave them together and drag them down, Perez said as he untied the cloak's ties with a rough hand, and I can't let it go easily. Flop. The cloak, which was thrown off roughly, landed heavily on the colorful chair. Are you ready for the job? Perez asked Lignite. Yes, Ramona is coming back from Susu to the Imperial City, so I'm thinking of starting as soon as she gets there. Proceed carefully without any disruptions. Okay, don't worry about it. Excuse me. Just act faithfully as Lady Lombardi's fiancé. Stretch. Perez, who was twisting his long legs like a painting, stopped moving. Red eyes glared at Lignite, but Lignite, who had already been immune to that much, only smiled round and round. Oh, if it's Lady Lombardi, we'd love to see her. You didn't show her to us once, Your Highness. You're so shut up, Perez said, picking up a book on the desk in an irritating tone. Then an envelope on the book fell off. Perez, who picked it up, asked Tedro, this letter, when did it arrive? This morning. It arrived while Your Highness was practicing swordsmanship. But why didn't you tell me? Perez was angry with Tedro. Oh no, Lignite struck Tedro on the shoulder, regretting that His Highness had been so careful with the letter. See the color of that letter? Keep that in mind. That's something special. Whatever his colleagues talked to him about, Perez hurriedly opened the letter. The eyes reading the contents moved busily. And oops, Steely and Pedro shut their mouths in fright. Your Highness is he smiling? There was a small smile on Perez's face as he read the letter line by line. It was a warm and tender, a smile as the light pink of the stationery. Look at it, am I right? The 2 people who had not believed what they had said finally came to know a different side of Perez, and Lignite feel better again. He will no longer be accused of being a liar. That's ridiculous. Steely even grabbed his head in shock. Then Perez jumped up from where he was sitting and put on the cape again. Where are you going? Lignite asked. Capital. Now? Yes. Perez, who tied up his cloak, even packed a sword. Now, hold on, Your Highness. Give us a time to get ready too. Only then did the 3 who came to their senses begin to scramble to follow Perez. Then Lignite cried out and said to Perez, No, you mean to leave now? You're going to drive the horse all night. Suddenly, why, let's go at dawn tomorrow. Let's go at dawn. But Perez shook his head firmly. No. In a short answer, Perez first began to step into the stable where the horse was. Frustrated, Lignite shouted behind Perez's back. Why? Why no? Then Perez replied, jumping halfway down the stairs. Because Tia is calling. End of chapter 177. Chapter 178. Are you going to get me right now? I muttered while looking at the colonized imperial carriage in front of me. I hate it, but it arrived in front of the Lombardi mansion just in time for the Empress's dinner, which I decided to attend. It's a very high-end carriage that everyone else would like, but my carriage is better. Hello, Lady Lombardi. I'm here to pick you up to the Empress Palace. It was a proper treatment that ran all the way to the Empress Palace. No, are you forcing me? Don't even think about not attending. Either way, I was in a bad mood. Yes, no, nothing. When I smiled broadly, the servant's face turned a little red. I think I need a footstool. When I pointed in front of the carriage where nothing had been laid, the Empress Palace servant replied in surprise. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get you a footstool in a minute. In a hurry, while the servant took out the footstool, I turned to the side of the main building. It was the side where I felt a strong gaze a little while ago. Why do you look so fierce? It was Cyril who was staring at me to death. I usually didn't know, but her staring face looks just like Empress Robini. They must really be cousins. She must have felt that I was looking at her. Cyril didn't hide from my gaze. Rather, there was a more fire in her eyes. It was obvious even if I didn't ask why. She must be jealous because she feels like I'm going to the Empress's dinner when she's pushed out of the house. Cyril, no. It's all against my will. After all, it was the Empress' will. She just chose me because it was easier to hate me than to hate the Empress. But regardless of Cyril's feelings, if she keeps staring at me like that, I want to tease you more. Then the servant laid down the footstool in front of me. Thank you. When I said thank you, the servant smiled shyly. I stepped on the footstool and got on the courage, and I opened the window. I could still see Cyril staring at me. Under these circumstances, ordinary nobles would stare at Cyril, snort, and close the window. That is the general response. But I looked at Cyril and raised my hand. And gently, I shook my hand and smiled softly. Then Cyril was seen shaking her hands, holding the hem of the dress with her eyes wide open. Seeing her mouth move, I think she's been swearing at me. I can't hear a word because it's far away anyway. It's just her mouth that was seen. I smiled and waved until the carriage started and Cyril was no longer seen out of the window. While leaving Lombardy and entering the palace, the sun completely set. However, while looking blankly at the bright lit palace, a familiar path suddenly came in. Ah, this is the first place I saw Perez, the place where my father was suddenly checked by knights who were ordered by the empress. The carriage that picked me up was stopped. Perez's back of his black hair passed through the woods, though it was too dark to see. Then I sneaked out of the carriage and met Perez, skinny little Perez grazing to survive. Time flies, the one who was ridiculously small for his age because he couldn't eat. I don't know anything else, but I was amazed by him when I helped Lorraine escape. The physical ability to hold me in one arm and run up to the terrace with bare hands. I also felt a little proud. Caitlin and Kailus had a hard time raising children, even if he wasn't raised by me directly. It seemed like I raised him, especially the arm that held me tightly so that I wouldn't be afraid. Thump thump, my heart skipped a beat when I remembered that night. At the same time, a part of my mind became a little uncomfortable. I took my eyes off the black forest and coughing. Fortunately, the carriage was already approaching the Empress palace. Hoo-ha! I took a deep breath to calm down. For now, Perez's thoughts should be put aside, because, click, the carriage stopped and the door opened, and as soon as I got off, the Empress in her fancy dress approached. Good job coming here, Lady Lombardi. The Empress came to meet me in front of the Empress palace. You want to please Tia, don't even try to dream it. It was an unusual treat and the Empress' face, with her mouth slightly curled up, seemed to be willing to treat me like that. Thank you for inviting me to dinner, Empress, but I just said a simple greeting. I don't know where to put myself because you sent me a carriage. Thanks to you, I've come so comfortably. In general, no accompanying tribute was added. The Empress' eyes were chilling, but I don't give in to that extent. What do I do when you stare at me coldly? I stood face to face with my smiling face, without avoiding the Empress. The Empress was so beautifully decorated that it could make a loud sound. It was obvious that she cared more than usual. She wore more expensive dresses and more expensive jewelry all over her body. Every time the Empress moved, I could hear the sound of the jewels bumping into each other, and I could feel the blue eyes of the Empress sweeping me from top to bottom. She's trying to nitpick one of my clothes or accessories. I already knew that it was a method that the Empress often used to dominate the social circle, but the Empress's silence was unintentionally prolonged. There's nothing to pick on. Now, I looked perfect from head to toe. Of course, I wasn't as conspicuously jeweled as the Empress. I wore a dress with a splendid but dignified theme of a gold and red that was made using only the finest products. The must have noticed right away because she has a good eye. These shiny things in my dress are not just shiny pigments, but small jewels that the craftsman put in every detail. Probably more expensive than the dress the Empress is wearing, not to mention the design is more beautiful and prettier. The simple earrings were made exclusively for me by Crowley from Diamond Workshop of Pellet Corporation. The long circle along my hair was made by the handcrafter and delicately connected platinum and diamond one by one. The Empress' long eyelashes looked at me and trembled. She must have felt it herself. It's beautiful, but it's funny to see herself hanging on something. She seems to have been trying to break the bet with colorful jewels and trinkets she collected. Don't try to beat Lombardi with money. It's useless. Empress? I called the Empress with a smile, with an innocent face that doesn't know anything. Yes, did Lady Lombardi ever come to my dinner? Empress, the experienced socialite, quickly managed her facial expression and asked. I followed my father when I was very young, Empress. Oh yeah, the young Lady Lombardi grew up like this and became engaged to the second prince, the Empress said with a very happy face. How happy I was when I heard about the engagement of the second prince and the Lady Lombardi. She was so happy that she broke everything in her palace. To the Empress's response to the failure of the firstborn succession law, I asked Babe to make it a special book and keep it. You don't know how good it feels to read it every time I'm bored. Today, we've set up a place exclusively for the Lady Lombardi, not for the other guests. Aren't we going to be a family soon, are we? The Empress said with a good smile. I knew this would happen. It's annoying to be invited to the Emperor's dinner, but I can't believe I'm sitting face to face with her for a long course. Of course, no. I absolutely know. I knew this would happen, so I prepared it. I took a look around instead of answering. Oh, there he is. On the other side of the Empress Palace in the west, I saw a group of people approaching across a large boulevard in the east. I thought he might not be able to make it on time just because he's on the hunting ground. I called the man in front of the approaching crowd with a big smile. Sir Perez, perhaps he arrived at the palace and changed his clothes and came back. Perez walked to me boasting his shining beauty as usual, and the first thing he did was, Tia, it was to kiss the back of my hand with a soft voice. It was an act of ignoring everything about the Empress, a royal adult. But Perez only looked at me, Lady Lombardi, until the Empress calls me. Did the lady call the second prince? Yes, the Empress invited me to dinner, so I wrote to see if he could join me. That's rude. You don't mind if we have a nice meal together, Empress? We are going to be a family soon. The Empress kept her mouth shut so that she could no longer speak. It was something she said a while ago. The Empress forcefully raised the corners of her mouth because if she got angry with me over this problem, I would leave even before the dinner started. Yes, the more guests, the better. Let's sit together, the second prince. The Empress, who said so, glanced at me at the end of the sentence. Why, what? You said we're a family soon? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's, it was such a boring occasion. The Empress persistently tried to appeal to me to the point where I thought it was a divine move to call Perez. And as the conversation continued, the purpose of the Empress who brought me here today became clearer. Apparently, Cheshire is growing into an important commercial city, connecting the central and southern regions. Where's the Lord Galliahan Lombardi? These days, Lady Lombardi. In this way, all the questions are directed at my father. I can't help but answer it. Usually he stays in Cheshire. My father is so affectionate that it is not an exaggeration to say that Cheshire is his second child. Oh, I see. So that's why Cheshire is growing fast day by day. The Emperor seems to be more interested in Cheshire than I am. I wanted to get rid of this place quickly, so I pretended to be meaningless. It connects the central and southern regions, but what makes Cheshire the most prosperous these days in the shipboard trade with the east? Tuck. Sure enough, the Empress knife, which was quietly slicing the steak, fell off. At the same time, the atmosphere at the table cooled slightly. All right, this is the end of the dinner. But the Empress, who wiped her mouth with a white napkin, attacked me in a completely unexpected way. By the way, the engagement of the second prince and the Lady Lombardi is a little surprising. Perez, who was drinking wine, also put down his glass, apparently realizing that the flow was strange. I heard that you have such a deep affection for each other that you run together in front of His Majesty. I don't feel that at all in the way you look right now. She wasn't just saying it. The face of the smiling Empress had some strange conviction. It was clear that she doubted the relationship between me and Perez. Strangely enough, the blue eyes that never lost their light came out and looked sharply at Perez. It's it was when I tried to fight back. Perez, who was sitting on my left, suddenly grabbed my hand. It wasn't light touch, enough to put my hand on his. It was a little deep, digging between the fingers and pinching the fingers. And before I could stop it, he pulled my left hand slowly. Perez's red eyes looked at me like they were burning, and his mouth kissed my finger with an engagement ring heavily. It's so close. When I flinched slightly at the hot body temperature felt in my skin, looked dazzled to see the smile radiating around Perez's eyes. Second prince, the Empress cried out as if it was rude, but Perez was just a laid-back answer. I couldn't take her hand off once I touched it like this. I guess that's what it looked like to the Empress. Perez's thumb secretly rubbed the soft flesh between my fingers, and he smiled as if looking at the Empress. Then can I leave my seat and go somewhere undisturbed, Empress? End of chapter 178. Chapter 179. Wow, I was so surprised. Perez's face looked seductive enough to dazzle and suffocate at the moment. I thought this is what beauty is like. Hey, you're really dangerous. I could feel my heart pounding and my face turning red, but Perez was just obsessed with acting as my fiancé. I tried to think so and calmed myself down. After my mind calmed down a bit, the situation around me started to become clear again. The Empress seemed quite surprised by Perez's rather brazen attitude. Now that the Empress' composure has been broken, I covered my mouth, pretending to be ashamed when I saw Perez, and who had turned red. Oh my God, the prince. I was going to pull out my hand naturally, but Perez won't let me go. I pulled my hand out and wiggled in it, but his big hand didn't budge. I turned my head and stared at him, pretending to lean close to Perez, so it wouldn't be seen by the Empress. Hey, don't you let go of this. Then Perez quietly glanced at the Empress. Ha ha ha. When I checked the Empress with a smile, I could still see her watching me and Perez. Well, there's nothing we can do. It was a bit awkward to hold someone else's hands But if the Empress had some doubts, it should end here. I tapped Paris' shoulders that I was leaning on with my other hand and looked at him with love and madness. The Empress said as if she was displeased when Paris and I did not let go of our hands. That's rude, second prince. I'm sorry, Empress, but as you can see, my fiancé is such a lovely person. Once you held it, you can't let it go. It was Paris' light answer, which seemed to be furious even with me watching from the side. In addition, he added, of course, the Empress will understand with a generous heart. If Paris goes that far, the Empress has nothing to say. If she says, I can see your affectionate behavior, so let go of your hand right now, it would make the Empress embarrassed. Empress Rabini, well aware of that, so had no choice but to smile coldly and pass the answer. After all, Paris held my hand until dessert was served. My hands are sweating. It was time for me to give up because even when I looked at Perez, he just smiled at me. Talk. What the servant put down in front of me with the small noise of the plate was a strawberry cake in a familiar shape. This, I have prepared something that Lady Lombardi likes to eat. Was it Caramel Avenue, the name of the place? The Empress and I faced each other with a smile. Now the Empress was talking to me with a cake from Caramel Avenue. Like saying, I've researched you this much and I know you. For most people, cold sweat would flow behind their backs. I looked down at the cake with white whipped cream. The Empress will not be completely bluffing. The whipped cream cake with the strawberries was actually one of the desserts I bought often, but at the same time I could feel the limitations of the Empress' intelligence. The reason I bought this cake often was for L'Oreal, because this was Laurel's favorite. Marilyn, Laurel's baby, also took a little bit of this sweet whipped cream and ate it deliciously when it was put in her mouth. If the Empress' intelligence was so good, this is not what I like, but chocolate cakes scattered with caramel would be in front of me. If this was a dinner hosted by me, it would have been not a cake but a fruit sprinkled with the finest honey in front of the Empress. Thank you, Empress. I smiled and held a fork and ate the cake deliciously, as if this were indeed my favorite. I could see the Empress smiling satisfactorily. And there's another one in front of me. Empress, it's an engagement gift from from me to Lady Lombardi. The Empress seems determined to win my heart, apart from doubting the relationship between me and Perez. You're thinking of building a bridge through me to my father. There's no more money to borrow from Sasu, so Angenas is looking for a host to put in a new straw. If we look at it, it was my father who's making the most money in the continent right now. Thank you, Empress. When I opened the black box, there was a pair of emerald earrings in it. The antique design seemed to be an old valuable at a glance. Even though money dried up in Angenas, the Empress had money that the imperial family could operate individually. But as far as I know, most of them are also invested in the business of Angenas. As an Empress, she was quite generous. The Empress smiled and solved my question. It's a jewel that's been handed down from the imperial family for generations. That's right. It seemed to be an item from the imperial treasury. It's Lady Lombardi who will soon be a member of the imperial family. So I thought it would be good to keep one of the imperial treasures in advance. So I paid some attention. I'm delighted, Empress. I'll give this back to Perez later. It was a bit reluctant for anyone to have an imperial heirloom with no connection. By the way, there's a lot to discuss, including the engagement of Lady Lombardi and the second prince, and the wedding. Then, when will Lord Gallihan Lombardi return from Cheshire? I could notice it instinctively. This question is why the Empress held a dinner today and made me feel good with all kinds of complacency and jewels. I closed the earring box back and looked at the Empress. Empress, please listen without misunderstanding my will. And I said, making a really cautious expression, my father can't afford to care about things other than Cheshire right now. Physically, timely, and above all, financially. The Empress' eyes became sharp. I've done something to the detriment of that great pride. But unexpectedly, she didn't interrupt me or yell at Perez for being rude. I peered at Perez sitting quietly next to me. You said you have been busy. You've got the Empress purse dried up, haven't you? But I know a place that might help the Empress. Where is it? Pellet Corporation. Pellet Corporation. The Empress seemed quite surprised when a completely unexpected name came out of my mouth. As known, Pellet Corporation was pro-Lombardi and tends to pro-Perez. In addition, there was a time when Angenas and Pellet had a crush during the Triva Tree business. These days, Pellet Corporation is looking for a place to invest in the long run because it has too much cash. It's no big secret, as you know sometimes. I help Pellet Corporation with its work. The Empress' eyes flashed when I said there is a lot of cash. However, she asked vaguely, well, let's see if Pellet Corporation will listen to me. Clarivan Pellet is my teacher, but he's a person who can forget about the past when it comes to money and business. I think the Empress has been tempted by my words, and it seemed like she was thinking about putting in a word. Feeling Paris' gaze from the side, I suggested to the Empress, may I ask my teacher for the consultation, Empress? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Long time no see, Caitlin, Kylus. How are you? After dinner with the Empress, I came to Paris and Poirac Palace. Lady Florentia, although Caitlin sometimes went to the mansion whenever the Lombardy scholarship was held, for Kylus the last time was when we had a brief conversation with the people of the Herring family on my grandfather's birthday. As we were talking for a while, Paris said to the two, bring a dessert with chocolate and warm tea. Yes, Your Highness. Caitlin and Kylus watched Paris for a while and then went outside. Tia, huh? Now sit down and rest. Oh, it was a strange thing. As soon as Paris said so, fatigue came. I must have been unknowingly nervous about dinner with the Empress. I sat down on the sofa with a rattling sound. Thank you, Perez. And as it was, I lie down on the sofa after a long time as if falling to the side. Tia, Perez, who was taking off the buttons on his neck, frowning a little as he was frustrated in surprise. His eyes are big and his face is stiff. Ha ha ha, look at your face, Perez. Sighed Tia. Just kidding, kidding. Did you think I'd barely fall for something like this? Don't you think I'm too fragile, Perez? When I burst into laughter, Perez washed his face dry with both hands and sat on the floor under the sofa where I lay. There was no conversation between us for a while, but that didn't mean it was awkward. Rather, such a time was convenient, because Perez is one of the few people who can be comfortable for me. After a while, in a slightly hoarse voice, Perez asked me, are you sure you don't mind? What? The Empress borrowing money from Pellet Corporation. Oh, that. I answered with a big stretch. Don't worry, I really don't want to lend her money, because if I do, your plan will fail. Perez is not surprised that I know of his plans that he has never told me. Rather, it was close to a natural response. The Pellet Corporation will buy bonds for the construction cost of Lombardy by the Empress, and Janice will be in debt to Pellet Corporation, not Lombardy. It says she doesn't have to repair it right away. A bond. Then I'll be able to support you as you move, Perez. Finally, Perez turned his head towards me. By the way, the distance was closer than I thought. The distance between my face lying on the sofa and Perez's face. I coughed deliberately and patted Perez on the shoulder on pretending to be fine. And you don't have to overdo it. Overdo? In front of the Empress earlier, holding my hand. What would you say if she suspected it? Don't you think so? I giggled, but Perez wasn't. He just looked down at me with a deeply sunken face. Smile a little, I grumbled, but this time Perez didn't react. Sigh. I sighed briefly, smiled and said, Perez, you haven't forgotten yet, have you? We are just contractually engaged. Perez and I can't be more related. No, it shouldn't be. Perez, red eyes, which had yet to answer, contained only me. Oh, I had a sharp pain in my chest. Perez, he conveyed his heart to me again and again, but I can't agree with it. I must not cross that line. I can't repay Perez's feelings with a happy ending, because, Tia, Perez came up calling my name. I could feel Perez's shadow on my face as it moved. Right, I was lying down. A little vainly, I looked up at Perez, who was half overlapping above me. Tia, Perez's voice, that closer, was like chocolate. It was deep, sweet, and dark somewhere. Perez's hand moved slowly, keeping eye to eye. As if to avoid it, the large palm warmly covered the flat area with the heart under my collarbone. At that moment, I realized that my heart is beating so fast. Feeling the beating of the heart on the breastbone, under the thin skin, Perez smiled deeply and said quietly, I think you're overdoing it. With that voice, my heart began to beat faster. Then Perez came closer to my ear and whispered, You don't have to endure it, Tia. End of chapter 179. Chapter 180. What I Want. Perez focused on Tia's fingertips as she approached the two ring boxes side by side. It was as if she was holding her heart in her white fingertips. Do what you want, he boasted, but in fact, Perez had forgotten even breathing. Please, whether it's unfortunate or fortunate, her worries were not long. Tia chose the transparent diamond ring she had prepared. Woo! Paris let out a long breath inside. He already knew what kind of choice Tia would make, but regardless of that, he was disappointed. You already know what choice I'm going to make, Perez. Tia said so and tried to wear a ring herself. Wait, Perez took a diamond ring from her hand and slowly put it on into her soft finger. Above all, the solid and beautiful diamonds shone more in her hands. It suits you, Tia. As Perez said, her bright green eyes looked at him. I'll keep this for a while, until everything is ready. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Thump, thump. There were heartbeats like a sweet song. It was not Perez. These clear heartbeat sounds were Tia's. At this moment, his own body, which has crossed human limits due to his auras, rarely feels this. Thump, thump. It sounded warm and cozy as he approached the sound, which grew a little faster, burning Perez's body. He was glad that Tia's heart was responding to him, and it seemed to burn his mind white. Perez approached carefully. It was always like that when dealing with Tia. Did I hurt something more precious than my life? Even breathing became cautious. Finally, the distance between the two is close enough to mix breaths. He could see her slowly closing her eyes. Blue tendons grew in his hand, which was now resting on the sofa floor, and fully supported Perez's weight. As the lips were about to overlap, knock knock. Your Highness, your fellow Academy colleagues have come to see you. Sorry, Caitlin, who found the two people half overlaid on the sofa, turned in a panic. That's rude, Caitlin. Perez, who hardened his face, lifted himself. It was the first time he was angry with Caitlin, but Caitlin didn't feel bad about it either. Rather, she apologized again and again, with a face that had turned red. I'm sorry, it was my fault. It's okay, Caitlin. It was Tia who got up from her lying down. As if when did it happen? She couldn't find the heat a while ago. It all happened as if just a few simple gestures to check her outfit. I'm leaving. Tia, who left those words, left the drawing room, showing Perez only her back, and she ran into Perez Academy colleagues waiting outside the door. Ah, good evening, Lady Lombardi. Lignite, Tedra, and Steely recognized her and quickly greeted her, and one person who laughed and chatted with them, Ramona, a woman with red hair tied together, looked at Tia in surprise. Maybe she didn't think Tia was here as a guest. Ramona's blue eyes were round. Long time no see, Miss Ramona. Oh, hello, Lady Lombardi. I can't believe you remember me. Tia smiled faintly instead of a detailed answer. Tia, hold on. Perez, who was chasing after her, found his colleagues, but it didn't matter to Perez. I'll take you there. But Tia shook her head. The guests are waiting, Perez. See you later. Tia, who had a smiling face but coldly refused, looked back at Kylus and said, Will you call my courage, Kylus? Yes, Lady Florentia. Bye, Perez. Finally waving a small hand at Perez, she walks away. Perez's gaze didn't fall from her back until he could see her turned around the corner. Tia did not look back at him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The day after I went to the Empress Palace, I had lunch with Laurel, then went outside under the guise of digestion and walked around the mansion. Rustle, rustle, fallen leaves fell on the road, making a sound every step of the way. Employees diligently swept the road whenever they had time, but they couldn't stop the falling leaves from falling apart. Walking thoughtlessly, I have arrived at Lorraine's greenhouse. Because there is no owner, it changes here as well. The greenhouse, which was always full of colorful flowers, was now empty. Some of Lorraine's most cherished flowers were moved to my room, and the others withered. I saw some empty pots over the glass in the greenhouse, but I wasn't sad. Lorraine is having a great time with Avenox. As I walked past the greenhouse, I saw a familiar figure on the other side of the road. It was Belsac. As Vis and Cyril were kicked out to the annex, Belsac also saw a significant decrease in access to the outside. It wasn't arbitrary. Astana no longer calls Belsac. There's only a greenhouse over here. Still, it was Belsac who was playing as a younger brother for Lorraine. Maybe he's walking this way because he misses Lorraine. That would only make it even more reprehensible about what he did to Lorraine. Hey, you. Then Belsac, who was kicking the fallen leaves and venting his anger, found me. Then he came up and asked, with a hideous face, Is it you? What? Could you ask using the right question, Belsac? Don't act innocent. Belsac gasped, You stole my sister. Was I steal her? What if it wasn't stealing? Someone who was locked up in her room and sent her away. It's funny how you argue with me proudly. Then why did you keep Lorraine's locked up? Belsac was unable to answer. He has nothing to say. He indeed kept a healthy person, locked up and took turns guarding the door like keeping a prisoner. My sister promised to marry His Majesty the First Prince. You make such a person run away with that countryman. That was for Lorraine. It was better than kicking the chance to marry the imperial family and getting in the eyes of a strange guy and running away. A chance to marry the imperial family? I laughed because I was dumbfounded. Was it a chance to marry someone like Astana? Even if it's stupid, there's a degree. Why don't you get married if it's such a good chance, Balzac? They are of the same race, so even 100 years is impossible. And tell the truth, you're not mad at me for ruining Lorraine's reputation. It's just a split that left you and your parents deprived of any opportunity to gain at Lorraine's sacrifice. So, you're having a good time being called to the Empress dinner in exchange for being stuck with that lowly fellow, aren't you? Stick around. His tone is as cheap as his personality. I asked with a smirk. Your mother must have been quite envious of me, seeing as you already know it. What? Belsac came as if he would slap me in a minute, but he had to stop in no time. It was because some of the knights of Lombardy were watching Belsac in the distance. Their face is familiar to me. They were usually close to the twins. They were covered in dirt and sweat, perhaps on their way to rest after the training. But Belsac was still standing there, even though they were planning to intervene. Wake up, Belsac, if you don't want to be kicked out of the family like your father. Belsac was furious at what I said, but couldn't move easily, looking at the knights. And you, it's not the right thing to be angry, I said, passing right by Belsac. The reason why you can't see Lorraine anymore is not me, but your dull parents who tried to sell their daughter to a scoundrel like Astana. I walked again with Belsac behind my back. Surprisingly, he was quiet. If it's his usual personality, he'd say bad words to me. Oh, I feel good. I thought today was a bad day to meet Belsac on the way for a walk. Rather, the stomach that's suffering from digestive problems got a lot better. I should at least send Lorraine a present. It was when I mumbled like that and passed the front door of the mansion. I saw a familiar back figure about to get on the carriage. Brown hair that is finely twisted and neat without wrinkles. It was Caitlin. Oh no, I'm not ready to see Caitlin's face again. I turned around quietly and tried to escape, but Lady Florentia, our Caitlin has good eyes. I couldn't help but smile and say hello to Caitlin. Hello, Caitlin. What happened? Come to the mansion. What happened? Come to the mansion. I have something to discuss with the Patriarch for the Lombardi Scholarship next week. I'm on my way. Scholarship? It's not time for a scholarship yet. I stopped, speaking at the memory that came to my mind. There was a time in my previous life when such an early scholarship was held. It's because of that thing. I looked at Caitlin for a moment and said, "Yeah, then walk carefully. Lady Florentia, I'm sorry about yesterday." Caitlin bowed her head and apologized to me wholeheartedly. "I will be careful not to let that happen in the future." But I shook my head, and I answered with a smile, "No, Caitlin, it won't happen in the future, so you don't have to worry too much." "Yes?" Caitlin hesitated for a moment as if she didn't understand me. Then she nodded slightly. It was such a Caitlin response not to ask questions that crossed the line, even if she was curious. "Then get home safe, Caitlin." I tried to step toward the annex after greeted her. "Well, Lady Florentia," until Caitlin called me with a very hesitant face, "do you happen to have a prior appointment next week when the scholarship is held?" "No, I'm going to be in the mansion." Then, as expected, Caitlin was hesitating. However, she said with a firm face whether she had made up her mind soon, "Can I have a moment of your time that day? I'd like to introduce you to someone who Caitlin wants to introduce to me." I could guess who it was. This time, I hesitated for a moment, but there was also a fixed answer for me. "Yes, Caitlin." I smiled and nodded. End of chapter 180.